Welcome to Cycling Conversations with inGamba, where we celebrate the art and the culture of the sport, the rhythm, the ritual, and the refinement that surrounds it. inGamba means in the know, and as with our cycling tours, these conversations are meant to bring you behind the scenes in our world. This is a space for when sport meets elevated living, where a former pro racer dissects the brutality of racing a classic, followed by a cycling CEO sharing their favorite spot for a post-ride Negroni. Along the way is our creative director and award-winning cycling photographer James Startt, who joins me, Molly Hurford, to unpack the cultural currents shaping the sport and the destinations that make it so beautiful. To learn more about our award-winning bike tours and to join us, visit inGamba.pro or the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome back to Cycling Conversations with inGamba. I'm cycling journalist Molly Hurford, and today my co-host, inGamba creative director and award-winning cycling photographer James Startt and I are joined by two incredible guests. We have North America's Sommelier of the Year, multi-time Sommelier of the Year, Aldo Sohm, and we also have Brian Nygaard, who is an amazing cycling journalist, a winemaker, a philosophy major, pretty much everything from cycling to wine. And we are bringing really the culture of cycling and wine together in this episode. James, what had you the most excited about putting these two guests together?
Firstly, I'm really excited about this episode because it just defines everything that we are. When I joined inGamba, what attracted me most was this combination of cycling in these great destinations and enjoying the all the culture around it, be it the food, the drink, the art, whatever. And so having Aldo and Brian together is just amazing. I've known Brian forever because he was a press officer for many years, and that's where we met in the trenches, as you will. But we've been friends ever since, and he's morphed into a journalist for one of the most historic Danish newspapers, and then he has also started making his own wine. And so I thought that was just a fascinating story. And then, of course, having the chance to sit down with Aldo, who is, a living legend. And it gave me a chance to read his books and to reflect a little bit more on how he chooses wine and how I learned so much reading his books about, how wine is so dependent on what you're eating it with and things like that. And it was just a total natural, I thought. And, the chance that, fortunately, he's a longtime friend of inGamba's, and so he knows about us. He's been with us. We're all friends. So we have this, it was just such a no-brainer to bring these guys together. And it was an amazing, amazing moment for me.
Absolutely. And I mean, bringing together this idea of the wine you drink, the roads you ride, the bikes you ride, I think it really does lend itself to this is what inGamba is, right? We're not a touring company that focuses just on climbing up the hill at the fastest rate possible. If you want to do that, that's fantastic. There will be a guide that will lead you right up that hill into getting that Strava KOM if that's your jam, or you can take your time up it, and at the end of every ride there's going to be the perfect glass of wine. Not only the perfect glass of wine, the wine that is from that region, the wine that's from the vineyard that's right down the road where we know the owners, we've spent time with them. It's exactly the right bottle for exactly the right occasion. I think that's what makes inGamba so special is the blend of that culture, the food, the drink with the cycling. And we know we're probably going to have a lot of new listeners to this episode because of who Aldo is. And if you're coming over from the wine side of things, but you love riding your bike, definitely consider joining us on a trip. And if you do have a particular type of wine, a particular varietal you're interested in, definitely let us know. Find us at ingamba.pro/contact. We'll include a link in the show notes, and we can pair your trip with your wine preference. We have so many awesome trips and so many fantastic wine regions in Europe. So we will find the trip that suits your tastes.
Absolutely. It's going to be an amazing podcast. I mean, sitting there with Aldo and Brian, and they know those roads in Tuscany, the Chianti Classico roads from are basically, our
backyard.
our backyard, right? And they're describing they're describing the rides that we go on at inGamba when you're down in our Chianti Classico trip from from a wine perspective, and they're going, now we understand why this wine from this domain is different than this wine from this, because there's an altitude change between them, you know, as the roads go up. So they bring this idea of cycling and wine together, winemaking together on a completely other level that, you know, and I think it's safe to say that, you know, only nGamba gets that. You know, I mean, we're that's who we are, and to have them talking, dissecting the Chianti Classico wines through a bike ride, and coming back with concrete descriptions and differences about why each wine is different or has these characteristics based on the roads that they're on. It's utterly unique, and and I'm really, really, really happy to have done this podcast. It was just a joy for me to meet with them and discuss this.
Absolutely. All right. Well, crack a bottle of champagne open, pour yourself a glass, and enjoy this conversation with Aldo and Brian. We have Aldo Sohm, sommelier at Le Bernardin, wine director at the Aldo Sohm Wine Bar, author of Wine Simple, winemaker, and my personal favorite point, Zalto Glassware brand ambassador. I adore Zalto glasses. Just have to say, we could do a whole podcast episode on only that.
The gold standard.
So good. We're also joined by the amazing Brian Nygaard, journalist, cycling expert, podcaster, and winemaker with a master's degree in philosophy. And I am dying to find out how all of this blends together. Welcome to the podcast, you two. We're so excited to have you here.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
An intro. What an intro.
Yeah.
I mean,
no pressure.
Anyone gets dwarfed in the company of Aldo. So I feel like you really picked me up in this context. Thank you, Molly.
I loved how you two, as we were emailing back and forth to plan this podcast, you and Aldo, Brian and Aldo, were just so excited to chat with each other about all things wine and cycling. So I really feel like James and I could just sit back and just let you two, I believe, I forget which of you used the term fangirl over each other.
That was me.
I love it. James, where do we want to start here? There's so many directions we could go.
That's an understatement, I think. Anyway, well, we've started this the cycling conversations just a couple of months ago, and I was really looking forward to this one because obviously we love cycling, but we also love everything related to cycling. And we've already done one on cubism and futurism, and art and cycling, and wine was sort of the next one up. I said, this is such a no-brainer. I thought immediately of Brian because Brian and I have known each other for years. I knew Brian first when he was a press officer back with CSC, and then I was having dinner with Joao Correa, the founder of inGamba, and was mentioning the idea. And he said, "Well, you should connect with Aldo." And we were in his favorite little local restaurant in Lisbon. And I didn't know that there was a inGamba connection there, but I very soon learned there was, and was only too happy to pursue that thread. And I went out and bought, I was just back in the States, I went out and got Wine Simple Perfect Pairings, which I've been reading diligently. And I thought you two together would be amazing. And then I learned that you are actually friends yourself, so it's even more amazing. I guess really the first thing is, either one of you or both of you, obviously we all share common love for cycling and wine. At face value, perhaps, alcohol and cycling might not go together so well, and yet they do. Why, in each of your opinions, do these two things or these cultures work so well together, and why is there such a balance between them? What's your own balance between them?
You go first, Aldo.
Easy question.
Me?
That was my easy question.
Well, I'm afraid on this cycling podcast here, I'm the lightweight in cycling. I'm just very passionate about it. I mean, look, I don't have to win the Giro d'Italia, nor the Tour de France, nor any major race. I just do this. I just started cycling 12 years ago and really got into it. And I realized the health impact, what it changed in my life, and I work in a restaurant quite a bit. And, eating and drinking, you realize you come into an age range where you see, I left my 20s a couple of weeks ago, so to the 30s also, right? The 40s, and eventually this starts showing. And I had to invest into my health. So cycling was part of it. But, stop drinking just because I start cycling, I would have been out of a job, probably. On top of it, I like it too much. And I realized one thing. Like in today's world, we always go to the one extreme or the other. There's no more middle ground. And I actually take great joy, when I go cycling in Dolomites, right? I'm excited for dinner because eventually I get hungry. And with my dinner, I want to have a glass of wine and ideally something good. And so that's how it started. And I think oddly enough, we take a wild guess who connected me and Brian. Of course, Joao. That was in 2020. And we hit it off immediately. It felt like Brian is this old friend, which I've never met. But it was a very, very, and we realized there's actually very, very a lot of connection points, and wine was not one of them, right? So to me, and then we did also in 2022, I think I did a Tuscany inGamba joint venture where we biked 2 vineyards. Of course, Eros' brain was about to jump out of his skull, right? I said, said what? I said, yeah, we go in full cycling gear. We go to the winery. We taste wine, and it was just before harvest, so we could taste the grapes and taste the corresponding wine with it. So people got a picture, and I made them all spit because we don't want to kill ourselves. But we put a case of wine into the car and had it then for lunch or for dinner.
Oh, wow.
That was amazing. So people got it, and that's why I enjoyed so much, especially in that trip, because you could showcase people when you cycle up from Lecchi towards Radda, you feel the air is getting cooler. In a car, you don't realize this because A, it's a very curvy road. B, you don't feel the temperature because your AC is probably on and you're distracted by the music. In cycling, everything is slow. And then you put a lot of energy out and eventually you have to put it back in.
That's wonderful.
And I don't want to live off only on gels. That's not how I function.
I can really connect to all of that. Certainly also the health aspect. I would even still ride my bike if it was unhealthy because I love it so much. It's one of those things that once you get into it, especially, both from living in California, but also certainly when I moved to Tuscany, it just became an inevitable thing. I think one of the things that also connect them, I think, is the love of being outside, the love of nature, seeing things grow. One thing that I found what you said was really interesting, Aldo, was seeing things and experiencing vineyards from the bike is something that has really been an eye-opener for me. I lived in California in Sonoma County during COVID, and I was riding my bike from Healdsburg, and I actually think it's a place where inGamba has also had trips starting from. And when I was riding my bike through the Russian River Valley and then heading out towards the Sonoma coast, which happens to be a place where I now work with a vineyard in Occidental. I work with a grower called Charles Heinz there, whom I buy grapes from. And actually feeling the climate difference and the terroir difference from entering into Sonoma coast, coming from the Russian River Valley, and feeling the cold coming in from the Pacific, almost having to put on a jacket even or a vest on a warm day, just to be able to feel that difference within just a few miles even was just such an experience I could only have on the bike, because in the car you wouldn't notice because it would all be the same because you're sitting inside. And riding as slow as I do, going past vineyards and experiencing how within a very few kilometers that the growing season would almost change from two AVAs. In America you call an AVA is separate wine regions, bordering next to each other, just to see how a few kilometers would change because of the cold of the Pacific. And I could only really see that on the bike, because in the car I wouldn't notice. So the bike, even also in Tuscany, the bike has really given me an understanding for tiny little microclimates. So in that way, the bike has also been a vehicle for exploration, for also in the area around Lecchi, understanding, as Aldo also said, why is it colder up in Radda, and how do you experience it immediately also when you go up to Lecchi from Gaiole, and all those tiny little parts of Chianti, and see how complex it actually is. You learn a lot from drinking, but when you actually see the vineyards and when you experience the small parts, you get a completely different understanding. And there is something about riding, I think with riding your bike, once you've ridden your bike with someone, you actually become friends. I don't know what it is. There's just this connection that's almost like having had dinner with someone or having had lunch with someone, because you put your guard down. You just have something in common, a special connection. And I feel like that connection is a little bit the same if you share a bottle of wine. You have this thing that you share, and it's and the sharing part of wine, I think, is such a fundamental thing. There's an innate generosity in wine. Wine is really a generous product that's meant to be shared. I really think riding your bike is also. I love riding my bike alone, but I don't mind having a glass of wine on my own, but I certainly prefer to do it in company.
It's funny. I think, Aldo, that's actually in the intro to the Perfect Pairings book, is you talk about this idea that you don't drink wine alone. It's almost always this social moment and a thing that you do with friends. So I love that we're bringing that up.
That's to me always the best part, because, and I see this on a daily basis at my wine bar. You assemble 10 random people from all walks of life. You give them 1 or 2 glasses of wine, and they start talking with each other, which I find amazing. And then, best of all, you give them a 3rd glass, and they start talking about mom's cooking, right? So
certainly in Italy,
this can go different ways then.
yeah.
But what I love about it, because then the genuine sharing element really comes in, and it's, I see this quite a bit, and I mean, wine is my passion, and it turned into my job. But I often think when I open a new bottle of wine, which I haven't tasted, I think often, on one thing, I assess the wine, and then think immediately, who would love that wine? Oh, that'd be a wine for Brian, because that's really out there, right? Or I would love to share this one. No, on its own, it's great, but it's just, nothing is greater when you see someone, you get this wow effect, right? Or when the eyes start popping up.
I also feel like the one thing that I've noticed also that is very similar in the cycling world and in the world of wine is the joy to connect with people who have the same interest. The way I met Joao, who I find is one of the most generous, and he sort of embodies the way to connect people in cycling. He's connected me with so many people, Aldo, and friends that have become really connections that I hold very dearly and across the world. And I've noticed the same thing in wine. Aldo, I'm sure that has happened to you also. Like, producers who, if you share the passion for wine, they're so welcoming. It's where I'm sitting now. I didn't know Gianpaolo Motta here at La Massa a year and a half ago. We met randomly outside a wine bar here in Panzano, in Otecaballo, and we just started chatting. And I was out here looking for a vineyard in this area. Just because of that, we immediately became friends, and we see each other really often now, just because we have wine in common. But then once you start talking, you have a lot of other things in common, And I think that kind of it attracts the same type of people who are really generous with what they do and generous in sharing their passion. Really, I have to honestly say I've never really met a wine producer who wasn't very nice to invite me in and answer questions, because in the same way that cycling, I feel that now I've spent spent half of my life working in cycling, which is basically the only thing I've ever worked with other than wine. I still feel like there's always a lot more to learn. And the same with wine. It's been a very steep learning curve for me. I'm still such an amateur with everything, but I really feel like the willingness to share knowledge, even equipment, well, luckily for me, it's been very, I wouldn't say it's been easy because that's due to my shortcomings, but it's been a very, very easy in the sense of people helping me out, getting started in this world. That's the same in cycling. I came in with a master in philosophy, and that's as useless as anything, but people were happy to give me a chance, and I took it.
It's useless or as useful, as we all know for people who study philosophy. But this idea of the common denominator, be it the bike or the table or the glass, I think is really intriguing. It's actually one of the things that attracted me to inGamba. I was thinking about, stepping away a little bit from the racing scene, and the travel scene really interested me. And it was the combination of both great riding and, food and wine. And this is so central to the DNA of the company, and what Zhao created is that, both the bicycle and the table are a common denominator, and that bring people together, and barriers fall down very quickly in situations like that. And I think it's one of the really central elements of inGamba, and I think one of the keys to its success. Brian, I've known you for years. I was trying to think, I'm not sure when, but it was CSC for sure.
I think I'm sure we probably met at the very first tour I did, because you were always around. So that my first tour was in 2001.
Okay, so then that's a quarter of a century. Yeah. So I knew you were in the press officer at CSC, and I always had a good relationship with Bjarne and a lot of the riders on the team. So yeah, I spent plenty of time around the bus and got to know you, and we had as a result, a lot of mutual friends. And then I was at the team presentation when you launched Leopard-Trek, and you were the founder and manager of a World Tour cycling team. And then obviously I followed you more recently in your more recent journalistic adventures with your newspaper and obviously cycling podcasts. But I only have been able to follow you from afar in your passion for wine. You were the general manager of was it Stummler vineyards, and that's where you started in Sonoma, and now you produce your own wine, Oceanic.
Yes.
So I have a question. I think I can really only ask you, and you can only answer. What are the similarities between running a World Tour bicycle racing team and running a vineyard?
I'm glad I don't have to answer that one.
I said there's only one person who can answer that question. It's Brian.
There are a lot of moving parts in running a winery and a vineyard, and there's certainly also a lot of moving parts. The major difference is that the vineyard is not going anywhere, right? The cycling team is going everywhere, and if you run a World Tour operation, you will oftentimes find that you have 3 groups of riders, staff, racing at 3 different parts of the world at the same time. So everything is moving at any given time, really. Mm-hmm. Whereas a vineyard is still, but the seasons are moving around it, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it, which is one of the first things that you have to accept. You're in the hands of nature, and whereas you can, as a cycling team, you can try and optimize and leave the element of chance as much out of the way, because you can really try and optimize every single bit. Whereas with a vineyard and everything, you can try to put yourself in the best position to help the vineyard do and produce as good as possible. What I did at Stuhlmuller was trying to run a business, and trying to. I think my impact there, in the years I was there, and then also afterwards when I was chairman of the board, was trying to make sure that our staff, more than anything, I think that was the best experience I could bring, was also to make sure that 2 different that shouldn't be that different, but ended up, before I came, were definitely 2 apart, was the winemaking team and the vineyard team, that I think back then, before I came, were two separate entities. And I think sometimes in bigger operations, this was a ranch of 400 acres with 150 acres of vineyard. and a relatively small winery production with around 15,000 cases, and they didn't get along. And I've noticed that sometimes on cycling teams that you have a service course team where an administrative part, and then you have the on the road team, and they don't always get along either. So my big part there was to make everyone work together and work for one goal, which was, you know, the goal of the business really. The interesting thing was that I was there during the period of COVID where everything was an absolute mess, you know, in terms of running a business. And I was also there during the biggest wildfires of California. And I was also there when my wife gave birth to two twins, and I left before them, and I didn't get to see them for 5 months. So it's also a relatively challenging period. But I have to say that because I was the only one who actually believed that COVID would also come to California, I was able to prepare relatively early. So I without patting myself too much on the back, I was actually at least able to save the business in that side, and to make sure that we actually had a functioning group of people. And I've always something that I definitely learned from working with Bjarne, which who's not always the easiest person to work with, but he was a guy who really believed that everyone have to pull towards the same goal. He made a lot of riders better than they were because they realized that, and it has to be that way in a cycling team. Yeah, I've seen groups perform better than the sum of the whole. Absolutely 100%. That's something that you can also see in teams where it's certainly not the case, and you see teams that really rise to the occasion. And that's what I was an absolute amateur, and whenever I thought about winemaking, it was more reverse engineering. I know what a great wine tastes like, and I would have to think backwards. So how do we get to that point, and how do we try and avoid, that the winemaker doesn't have the right tools or doesn't have the right possibilities to work with the vineyard management team so that he doesn't get the grapes that he really wants. All of those moving parts were I was trying to lay out the foundation so that all this was actually possible. Yeah. So that was really what I took with me and made sure that I could have an impact that way. And it was actually more human relations than anything, because I think that once that's in place, it's so much easier to run a business when people actually know what the whole point is. Why, it's almost always boils down to the fact that happy people just produce better shit. It can sound banal, but it actually goes for me as well. It's if you really create a good environment for people to perform, even if it's not always high performance, because sometimes people also just go in and do their job and go home again. But if they're actually happy in the context of how they do it, sometimes you'd be surprised of how big a change it actually makes.
Yeah, it's. I mean, Bjorn was. I did a book with Jens Voigt, and I talked to a lot of people who talked to Bjorn, and I was always impressed. I never talked to one person that had worked for Bjorn who wouldn't work for him again. It was just, and I remember in the book with Jens, there's this one point, the team had won the team classification in the Tour, I think it was 2006. And he said, I'm standing on the podium on the Champs-Élysées, and I'm looking around at my teammates, and I say to them, remember this moment, we will never be on such a good team again. And he had that way of taking everybody higher and understanding, I think, human relations at a pretty steep level, which you can use in bike racing or in anything. I'm sure you, Aldo, see it in the kitchens and with your teams.
I was thinking the same, Aldo, because it must somehow also reflect on the kitchen and the front staff part, because there must be so many operational things where people could easily feel separated in what you operate with.
Yeah, 100%. But I mean, this used to be there was always a trench warfare between front of the house and back of the house. But, we changed this long time ago, where basically this was flattened because this was a silly war based on the client's experience, right? At the cost. And so we changed this completely. Are there frictions? Yeah. But then, at the end of the evening, we sit together, we talk it out, and there's no hard feeling. Next day we do it better. Life is too short. Again, and sometimes, it's often because it's very important, I think, that the front of the house knows, when they do something, how does this affect the kitchen and vice versa. They know that we, for instance, don't send 10 tickets in one shot into the kitchen. It's just the way how clients came in, right? We try to, stack a little bit the reservations up on top, but sometimes, one comes late, the other one comes early. What are you going to do, right?
Yeah.
But that's just the nature of the beast. And you have to react, and then you have different needs to satisfy of the client. I think that's reading the client. That's actually, where are they? I made myself recently very, very unpopular in a management meeting when they came up with the idea of AI-supported guest lists and all of that stuff. And I said, yeah, that's pretty rubbish idea, because only someone who never worked the floor can actually come up with an idea, because Mr. Smith is a very different client when he comes with a huge business client versus Mr. Smith comes with his wife. It's a very different client. If Mr. Smith comes with his mistress, is another very, very different client. No, but this is the nature of the beast, right? And I said, let's assume one more thing. Mr. Smith, same client, right? Already 3 different scenarios, 3 very different people. Has 2 awful business meetings and has to go out with a client he absolutely hates, right? Now, how great do you think this experience is going to be? And how do we flatten this out and still make him an enjoyable meal? That is our job, right? And that's just one scenario. So AI cannot curve that out, because if AI has hit this person with one and the same angle, and that's just not even we work that way. Right?
It's a lot more subtle than that.
Yeah,
100%.
Yeah, Aldo, I've really been enjoying your book, Wine Simple and Perfect Pairings, and
Thank you.
one of the things I've taken away the most is your, I think, just the importance of choosing a wine that accompanies or accentuates the flavors of a particular meal. And sometimes you choose a wine that complements a dish, say maybe a fruity wine with the dessert, but sometimes the wine is kind of a contrast, and that creates a push and pull, it seems to me. How do you decide like when to go into the sort of complementary or maybe the contrasty element? I guess let me just assume that you don't plug this into AI.
I try to do this currently, actually. I find it fascinating. No, I find it fast. But again, this is just me being me. It's a good question. I often get from journalists this question, what is your favorite wine? And I don't really have that, because it really depends on a variety of things. And the best way for me always to respond to this, I am not a moody person, but I'm a very moody drinker. It depends what time of the year, right? Is it like in New York, sticky, humid in the summer, or is it freezing cold in the winter, right? Are we maybe in tomato season, or right? Are we in season with white asparagus, and so on, right? I adjust every wine after that. And sometimes, I do it the reverse way. I see a bottle of wine in the store, and I was looking for that, and I buy that, and I cook after it as well, right? I'm kind of I explore all the time, but when I look at one thing, I often try to connect both, because the enjoyment is so much better. And sometimes, as I write in my book, also, obviously I don't want to make a 3 Michelin star sommelier out of the reader, but at least giving them a bridge so they can get to maybe a 90% pairing, not to 100, but at least there's confidence. And that's the idea.
Have you ever met a wine that you didn't like? Or let me rephrase that more specifically. Have you ever met a wine that you couldn't pair with something?
At Le Bernardin, yes. I mean, there's always some, every pot has its lid. But, at Le Bernardin, I often have to adjust after my partner, Eric Prepare.
Sure.
Right. We are known for seafood, so he cooks he cooks the seafood in a very, very delicate way, but it's extremely playful in the sauces. Now, and I give you an example. So, because I had the wine yesterday, I had a Montepulciano d'Abruzzo, from Cristina Tiberio. And that wine would be at Le Bernardin probably a rather challenging wine to get into, right? Because the tannins are too firm to work with that dish. I probably would go to the wine bar and have a little bit of a braised short rib, and then the wine's probably absolutely outstanding, right? Something meatier. So you make yourself work a little bit. Of course, if you have big wine dinners from big wineries, Eric actually is open enough. We adjust the sauce. We often, before the course is served, we take a little splash of the wine. I run into the kitchen, and then we taste and adjust the sauce to it, which is very, very particular and unique to us, just to make sure that the wines make the dish makes the wine shine, because we have the power over that.
Yeah, I was not impressed. I found it interesting your love for champagne and that you see so many pairings possible with champagne, and it seemed like you at one point I think said it can almost go with anything. Can it go with a steak au poivre champagne?
As an Austrian, I always said, Brunner Veltliner is the number one food pairing wine. If you're stuck, think of Brunner Veltliner. Tooth crunchingly, I have to admit, champagne is better. But to answer your question, yes, it's actually very easy. Because champagne, we often see champagne as this one bubbly beverage.
Sure.
Yet it's so much more. It makes a difference whether it's from white grapes like Chardonnay, or it's from the dark grapes, Pinot Noir or Pinot Meunier, and so-called Blanc de Noir. And if you use a Blanc de Noir with a little bit of age, you can serve this extremely well to your steak. Now, is it uncommon for the general public? Yeah. But you know what? There's many things uncommon, even in the cycling world, and all of a sudden it's implemented, right? It would have been unimaginable to ride with 32 millimeter tires 15 years ago, right? Or riding with cassettes with 34 in the back, right? And they would have laughed
tightly fitted clothing 15 years ago. They tried it on one team, and the riders were like, "No way!"
Yeah. If you ride with these big cassettes in the back, right? They would have laughed you out of the race, right? Yeah. Today, this is the most normal thing.
Yeah, that's true.
So these things, these norms can be broken. The ultimate thing is, and this is what I learned from my teacher, in primary school, we asked him if cheating was allowed during the exam. He says, absolutely. The only thing that's not allowed is being caught.
Amazing.
And I took this as he was a very tough teacher.
We could insert that in many ways.
100%. Well, I'm a firm believer in honesty, but still, sometimes you have to tweak and help yourself a little bit, but it's definitely possible.
Okay, I want to reconsider my approach to champagne.
But I definitely would not use a Blanc de Blanc, right? And a very austere from Le Mesnil on a steak au poivre. That is utterly failure. But for instance, give you a more common brand, use a Krug, a Grand Cuvée, for instance, with a little bit of age to it. You'll see you have all of a sudden connecting points because it's richer. It has this brioche element, and that builds your bridge into it.
If you're enjoying this episode with Aldo, definitely make sure that you are on our mailing list at inGamba.pro, because Aldo is going to be joining us on a trip later this year, and you do not want to miss those dates when they drop. Again, head to inGamba.pro to get on our newsletter so you do not miss a single trip.
That's fascinating. Brian, you are now you're producing your own wine, Oceanic. Obviously, it's like starting a new bicycle brand, and I mean, there's a lot of competition that's been there a long time. When you come into this, there's obviously a very deliberate reason, I think you have, and it's a very personal one, probably. What did you say to yourself? Why is it so important to me to create my own wine, and what do you want to do with it?
It's actually a little bit in the same sense, how I came into cycling, because I was supposed to do something completely different, and I couldn't help it. When I was finished with my master's thesis, I was supposed to go and do a PhD in Boston, and then I ran away with the circus. Really, I helped out at the tour, and then they offered me a job, and I ended up doing that for almost 20 years. And I randomly ended up running a winery. And after I did that for a couple of years, I certainly wasn't done. But my family, it was important to my family that we moved back to Italy, and we did that. But I couldn't let go of California, and I felt like I'd become that close to wine production, and at that point had gotten so many connections out in Sonoma and Anderson Valley, that I had to pursue that dream of really getting my hands into the matter. And I'm really curious by nature, and I like really physical work, and I like the fatigue of actually the mental fatigue of throwing myself into something where I can't necessarily see a way out. And then the thing with people also ask me, why don't you, you live in Italy and you've been in Tuscany for so many years. It is actually a lot easier to get things going in California. You can probably compare it a little bit to, it would also be maybe a little bit easier, as crazy as it sounds, in Burgundy. But in California, there is the thing where you can talk to a farmer, and if you're a nice enough person, you can buy grapes, okay? And you can find a place, a cooperative of sorts, where they'll let you, not all the places, but some of the places they'll give you the space to work with the grapes yourself. And I found such a place outside Healdsburg. It's not a custom crush facility, but it's a place where there's 2-3 other producers working. And I knew one of them, who's also a Danish guy called Leo Steen, and they gave me the possibility to work there. And then when this is the guy who doesn't answer emails, but he's a grower called Charles Heinz out in Occidental, and he works with some of the producers that I rate the most highly, like Seritas, Litorai, William Sellium, producers. I'm sure that some of them are probably also on Aldo's wine list, and those are really some of my heroes out in that area. And I just drove out to him and knocked on his door, and he's really into music, has a lot of vinyls and a lot of the music that I like, and we ended up talking for 2 hours, and he agreed to sell me grapes, and that was really what got me started. And then last year was my third year, and he opened up his holy shrine, and I was able to buy Chardonnay grapes from him last year, and that's really Charles Heinz Chardonnay is the holy grail of Sonoma Coast, for me at least, and that was a great honor to get my hands on that. And I also, when I started in 2023, I started to work with a small, it's not small, but it's obviously really growing. It's called the deep end of Anderson Valley, where I find some of the most stunning Pinot Noir to grow, and I work with an old vineyard, at least in this California context, in Mendocino in the deep end called Abel, where I work with a grower and producer called Wentworth, and they become really close friends as well, and I have a contract with them as well. I buy all my barrels from a tonnerie in Besso called Damy. So I only work with big 500 liters oak barrels, and I hardly use any new oak. I use 30% new oak. And I have to say the one thing that really keeps me motivated is, the growing season is as it is, and we can only really work with what nature gives us. And I have so much faith in the farmers I work with. But a really big part of making wine is to clean. And that's a physical job, right? And I clean like a crazy person. My mom would be so proud of me when she sees what I do in the compound over there. I don't make natural wine, but I don't really use anything but sulfur, and I use a really low amount of sulfur. And that's down to the fact that I clean like a crazy person, and I sort my fruit. Like to give you an example, if I get like 3 tons of Pinot Noir from Charlie, I'll spend 9 hours of sorting that fruit. Okay, and that's 9 hours of me standing on a steel ladder on a sorting table, I sort relentlessly, and I work with a lot of whole cluster, like sometimes even up to 75%. Not from Charlie, but usually like 50%. So I will look at every single grape that is on the table, every single grape that goes into my wine. I've had a look at, and that's the difference that I can make. So I suppose it's more a question of discipline, and I'm away from my family for 5 weeks when I go to make wine, maybe even a month and a half. So I don't really waste my time. When I'm there, I try to really put a massive effort into making the best I possibly can. I'm autodidact. I'm self-taught. So I know where I can make a difference, and the difference I made initially was creating good contacts by being, I hope, a nice person and someone that they want to work with. And everything else is just the nitty gritty of the hard work, the discipline. And that's probably something I brought with me from cycling, if you work harder, you're more likely to get a good result, really,
That's amazing. It's like, I remember with Joao we just came out with our latest version of inGamba, the magazine, and he, in his letter, he talks about pulling the thread, and he had this idea for a travel company. It came out on a placemat, and then for the last 15 years, he's just been pulling the thread, seeing how far he can go with it, how much he can build on it and develop it, and it's turned into, what inGamba is today, which is, is pretty amazing. Brian, you're actually on the Giro d'Italia right now, covering it, I believe, for the Cycling Podcast, as well as the Danish newspaper.
Cycling Podcast, Danish newspaper, the oldest newspaper in the world,
1749.
Yeah, and the Danish national TV. I do, like the 9 o'clock news and the early morning news and radio for them. So it's it's a patchwork for me getting, but I love it. I mean, get to talk about things that interest me, and hopefully I don't get away with too much nonsense when I do it. So yeah.
What came first, your love for Italy or the love for the Giro?
The love for cycling, I have to say. So the first bike race I saw in real life was the World Championships in Verona in 1999. I was starting my MA, so my master in philosophy was logic and semantics and epistemology, like really technical stuff. And that's why I ended up getting a scholarship to go to MIT, which I then, much to my parents' disappointment, ditched to go and work for a cycling team. But my brother lent me money to take the train from Denmark to Verona.
Okay.
And I'd never been to Italy before. And I arrived on Porto Nuova in Verona, and the race was already on, the junior race. And I was there for 5 days and watched all the races. And how can you not fall in love with Italy when you go to Verona and see the World Championships? The year Oscar Freire won the first time. I was hooked. I was completely hooked. And 2 years after that, I moved to Italy and I worked for a cycling team.
Wow.
It was just what I wanted. I couldn't. I had to find a way in.
Yeah.
And so that was it.
I remember that finish very well. I was down there with our mutual friend Samuel Apt, covering it, and I remember that finish under the arch, and it was, Also, there's just this. Italians have this way of doing bicycle racing where it goes. Of course, the Strade Bianche is going to finish in the heart of Siena. No, it's not going to finish on a 4-lane road outside of town. It's just like they have a sense of history and they place the sport in history so well, so often.
Exactly.
Obviously, not always, but so often. You guys have obviously both been to Borgo Lecchi, where it's our spiritual home for inGamba. I think on both of you on several occasions. For wine lovers,
disclose one thing.
Yeah,
we actually never met in person.
No. It's crazy.
We never had a glass of wine, nor rode the bike together. I know. I'm honest.
Okay.
That has to happen at some point, Aldo. Like, how crazy is that?
We most definitely.
Can I just suggest this on so that actually we have witnesses, like both you guys here and also whomever is going to listen to this podcast. Can we please do a trip together?
I was just going to say this might have to happen in Borgo Lecchi, huh?
Yeah,
I mean, what better place for wine and cycling lovers and for you guys?
Something to train for also.
Okay, we're gonna work on that.
Yeah.
We're gonna work on that. Go ahead.
We're planning anyway a trip with inGamba next year.
Okay.
Brilliant.
Yeah.
I'll start setting up then. I want to be there.
All right, we're gonna. Yes, we are. We are planning a trip. So stay tuned for more details, and I'll
Maybe.
let you know. I hope it doesn't happen when the Giro is happening. That would be a dilemma, bro.
No,
Too
no, no,
bad for
no.
the Giro. Too bad for the Giro.
Yeah.
I can't miss that. No, but I was
Um,
also I was a writer in residence because I covered the tour from part of the tour I actually cover from home because now with modern technology you can do commentating from everywhere. And I was a resident writer and commentator based at Lecchi.
Joao told me
2
about
years
this.
ago. It was absolutely amazing. Can you believe it? Like being at Lecchi for basically 3 weeks.
Yeah.
It was magical, absolutely magical. And after that, I stayed for next a few days and went to visit Carleone. It was in the period also when I got to know Giorgio here at La Massa. It was fantastic.
Yeah. We've talked a lot about some of the kind of classic wines, but there's a lot of, obviously, wine has evolved so much in the last 30, 40 years. I spent a lot of time down in the Languedoc region of southern France. And I came here for a family reunion 25 years ago, and I had the finest wines, the Pic Saint Loup and those wines. And I kind of felt they were great, but they were a bit what I considered to be heavy-handed at the time. And now I find that these are some of my favorite wines now. I find that they've matured very well. The whole region has evolved. They have a kind of interesting combination of grapes. They have a couple of grapes, Mourvèdre or Carignan, which not everyday names for grapes, along with Grenache or things. But wine is constantly evolving, and regions are evolving. Are there any on the global level, or are there any regions or areas that you guys are paying particular attention to, or that are really impressing you these days, where you're finding a lot of kind of really intriguing wines coming from?
I think Chianti is one of the regions that has changed the most quality-wise in Italy in the last decade, in my opinion. And I can say without, I'm certainly not relevant in that context, but I think now with climate change and the challenges that brings, certainly a lot of research and a lot of competence goes into farming for more freshness places where it's possible. And I certainly think that where I work up in Anderson Valley is one of the places where you can still work with the varietals like Pinot Noir without losing that element of freshness. To give an example, I finished my Pinot Noir from the vineyard there at 11.9 alcohol with full phenolic, like it was a fully ripe grape, but still a very low percentage of alcohol. And so that's a challenge, all over. And I think hopefully we don't have to go and grow different grapes or places in the world where we really have a history for grapes that we like coming from a certain place. But it takes a different approach to farming, and it takes really knowledgeable farmers to consider the challenges up ahead, and I'm curious to see how all that's going to be approached. I'm sure, Aldo, you're dealing with it with a lot of the wines that are coming into your cellar these years as well.
Yeah, I'm gonna finish with your first point, but I have to start obviously different because at Le Bernardin, obviously I'm very, very spoiled. I'm dealing with the greatest wines every single day, most rarest wines too. That obviously is currently Burgundy, right? With its white and red. I deal with a fair amount of Bordeaux, Champagne, Noir, of course. But what I find particularly interesting is a lot of young winemakers in the last 2 decades, they went to top wineries all around the globe and took their knowledge back into their original country. And you get to see wines right now where all of a sudden they change and they're becoming really, really exciting. And one of them, for instance, is Argentina. Now, Argentina is only known for Malbec and the very generic Malbec, right? That took the sweet spot in 2008 when the global recession was of California Cabernet. And ever since, but Malbec changed a lot. Then when you go to Spain, I think Spain is still absolutely on fire. in a sense, exciting, really vibrant wines. And then not talking necessarily about Rioja, Priorat, or Ribera del Duero. Just go to Galicia, even go to Andalusia. They're so dynamic. Portugal, the northern part, really exciting wines. I'm biased, obviously, but even without my bias, I think Austria and Germany is completely overlooked. Look to what brilliant Chardonnays Germany makes right now. Even Pinot, it's actually climate change is helping them right now. Actually, it's kind of in a twisted way. And to bring this home, I'm actually since a couple of years really targeting. I mean, Aldo at work is a very different Aldo than Aldo is at home. But I really started enjoying Chianti Classico. I agree 100%. And I have to admit, I was in 1992, was in Florence to learn Italian. Sadly, I forgot everything for 3 months, and I tasted the region completely. And this was just at the point where Cabernet was basically more and more introduced, and also New Oak was more introduced. Right? This was basically the 1990 breaking point. Right? So I tasted all the 88s, 83s, 85s. And I love these wines, absolutely loved. So I could taste all the single villages. You could recognize them. Then, it became quite a hype, and I got away from that because it seemed to be a little bit more mass marketed. And then when I prepped up for the inGamba trip in 22, I had to brush up my knowledge and started tasting again, because we humans make always one mistake. We label things and put them in an archive, but we don't revisit the archive. And in the wine world, things change all the time. And then I got to see how much actually I absolutely adore certain wineries, certain wines, right? And I never look at the label, right? For me, oddly enough, and this might shock probably a lot of your readers and listeners, I actually prefer Chianti Classico than Ovo Brunello, with 2 exceptions.
Me too.
Right? Because it's fresher, it's more vibrant, right? And again, this is personal, right? Of course, once it, listen, for me, Brunello is the greatest one. But by all means, this is just a personal opinion and a personal preference. But I find these wines really, really exciting. And if I put value to the price ratio, there's a full stop right there. And also the diversity, whether you go down to Castelnuovo Berendenga versus you go to Gaiole, then you go to Panzano, go to Greve. Those are very, very different styles. And they all suit to a different meal, right?
And I think now the consortio, the producers, they've also done a great job at now you can actually really distinguish also the different areas. Before, I think for an outsider, even one, I mean, I've traveled a lot in the entire Chianti region, but now you can really distinguish north, south, east, and west.
Yeah.
You can really, there's a very much, it makes sense now to talk about place in the various parts of Chianti. And
they go into higher altitude as well. That's how you
like you said, when you were riding from Lecchi to Radda, for instance, it is really
you go out to Castellina, you feel the wind coming in, right? And as a result, those wines are fresher, right? Those wines have a higher acidity. They have a little firmer tannin. You know it, right? It becomes logic all of a sudden.
Yeah. And the age worthiness and the freshness sometimes in the age worthiness, like the other night here at La Massa, we were drinking a 2006 Castellin Villa and 2016 Castellin Villa, and just okay, this is a 10-year-old wine, but it was just absolutely singing. And just to revisit some of those producers that you kept them for a little bit and then opening it up again and then realizing how beautiful and aged Chianti can also be, and it's not, I mean, that's not even actually that old for a Chianti, but yeah, it was absolutely on fire the other night. Such beautiful wines.
I love it. Okay, well, clearly you two could talk about wine all day, every day. But we are going to wrap up with some rapid fire. So I'm hoping that you two can give us either a specific wine or even a style of wine recommendation for a few scenarios that I've put together here. Okay, ready for this? Okay. What is the go-to wine for after a really long endurance ride?
Oof. What are we eating with it?
Up to you. You can also add a food pairing to it as well.
After long endurance, right? We want a steak, Brian, right?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. So we will have let's do a Tenuta Carleone from Sean 2001 Chianti Classico.
Fabulous. Okay. While watching the Giro d'Italia.
Oh, that could be like an enjoyable complex wine. What do you have in store there, Aldo?
I would almost think like a Barolo from Rinaldi at Retine.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
And I like 14. I don't know if it's often a weird vintage, but I like that fragrance, right? It has a vibrancy, there's a finesse.
I love this.
Oh,
Okay.
I would love that.
Post intervals. So you come in and you are exhausted. It's been a really hard ride. What's the go-to?
Beer
and then champagne. beer after those types of rides, like without a doubt. Ice cold Moretti.
Full stop.
Fabulous. Fabulous. All right. Watching the Tour de France.
Champagne. It's no doubt.
Champagne. I mean, when don't you want to drink champagne? I have to say though, I've gotten back into Bordeaux recently, and also the access to Bordeaux now is actually become a lot easier. I like drinking Bordeaux again. I also like drinking the Bordeaux varietals. Just for the record.
Perfect. All right. I know it's summertime, but after a really chilly winter ride, so you come in and you're still quite cold.
We're eating something here as well, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, hit me with the food and drink.
We always have a beer.
Yeah, beer. That's a given.
That's a step.
Let's. I mean, if let's say that if I had Aldo over for dinner and I would love to open some of my best bottles, I have some old Bruno Giacosa red label. I actually have a Magnum 96 red label Falletto. Aldo, I would be so proud to open that for you.
So when Aldo comes over.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good dinner invite here. Okay, and then my last one is for the American audience. What would you be drinking during the Philadelphia Cycling Classic, since it is coming back this year? And personally, I'm very excited.
Me personally?
Yeah, what's our go-to?
I have a sweet spot for a variety which is often looked down to for often absolutely no reason, is Zinfandel. If you taste some old Zinfandels, from the 70s and from the early 80s, I think this is completely overlooked, and those wines can be absolutely delicious, especially if you have a little bit some stewed meats, braised meats, you're gonna be in heaven. You can have rich, right?
For the same food, I would open a bottle from my friends at Arno Roberts in Healdsburg, Syrah from their own vineyard out in Taylor Lane, Syrah, and I think that they do such a great job. They make amazing wine. They're great inspiration for me, both those guys. Arno Roberts, Syrah.
Fantastic. Okay, before we let you go, let everyone know where they can find you, follow along. Aldo, obviously, they can visit your wine bar as well, but where else can we find you and follow you online?
Instagram is probably the easiest, at Aldo Sohm. I'm still working to understand TikTok. It's cryptic to me, but
that makes two of us.
3.
Yes.
Yeah, it's long.
And if not on Instagram, you see me with my inGamba jerseys riding around.
In there. So be my guest.
We'll put links to all of that in the show notes. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today, guys. This was so much fun. I learned so much.
It's a pleasure.
This is amazing. This is amazing. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us for Cycling Conversations with inGamba. Make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode, and we hope to see you on the bike soon.